Okay, everyone, if I can have your attention, we're going to get started. Last minute logistics. We're figuring out a few things on the fly. So my name is Kevin Thompson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Global Enabling Sustainability Initiative. And we're really excited to kick off this next panel conversation, which is going to be focused on advancing sustainable policies with digital technologies. We have a collection of panelists. So I'm going to first introduce everyone that is going to be joining the panel. And then we're going to have a brief comment from Google, a brief comment from Cisco. We also have a brief comment by video from Taiwan, and then we'll get into the panel conversation. So let me first start with our session moderator, Mr. Bernhard Lorentz, who is a managing partner and global consulting sustainability and climate leader at Deloitte. I'll ask him to sit here initially to my left. And then Mary D. Wysocki, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Cisco. And then we'll have Ambassador Alessadandro Fracassetti, who is the ambassador for UNDP in Egypt. We have Olga Skorokhodova, Dr. Olga, as I call her, because her last name is a little bit challenging for me. Thank you, Olga. The head of the Caucasus and Central Asia Government Relations and Public Policy for Emerging Markets for Google. And then we also have Henrique Donatella, the Director of Ministry for Management, Innovation, and Public Services from Brazil. And finally, Clever Gatete, the Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa. So we really have a great representation of public sector, different geographies from around the world, and two leading corporations in Google and Cisco. And so with that, I would like to welcome our panelists to the stage, please. And I will invite Olga and then Mary to give opening comments, and then we'll move into the panel conversation.
So, should we start? Great. A warm welcome from my side. I just learned that we have an additional panelist, which is great. Clever Gatete from the United Nations Economic Commission on Africa. A pleasure to have you here. Very warm welcome. We will have a great discussion because, of course, the Global South matters in the digitalization, in the digital gap, both, but also from the innovative perspective, a lot. Not only at this COP, but also because it's also close to our heart. We will not fix the climate problem without fixing the gap between the North and the South, not only in digital, but also in finance. At least this is a finance COP. My name is Bernhard Lorentz. I have the privilege to moderate this, and I will start with maybe asking Olga and Mary to come up with their initial remarks on something that I consider to have two sides of one question. The one question is, how can we use the incredible power of new digital technologies, AI of course, to develop smart policies? And we know that UNDP is probably the most influential policymaker in the world. I mean, Singapore by all means was a UNDP project in the 60s. And the second question then is, how can we develop smart policies to accelerate the digital transformation, which is much needed to have a successful, sustainable transformation? And I will provoke thoughts and comments around those two questions, which are closely interconnected, of course, in the dimension of the Global South and the Global North, to all panelists. It's really a great panel, and it's a privilege to be here, co-hosted by Cisco and Google. Speaking of those, Olga, why don't you kick us off with your thoughts on both questions and why does this matter for your work?
Thank you so much, Bernhard. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I think it's working. First of all, I wanted to start by saying big thank you to the government of Azerbaijan for hosting this event, COP29, and then also to our UN colleagues for bringing all of us together to discuss these very, very important questions and topics. Also, special thanks to you, Mary, for co-chairing this panel with me, and of course to you, Bernhard. We are very privileged to have Deloitte as our thought leadership partner on many, many aspects of our work. So Bernhard, to answer your question, you asked to to kick us off. I wanted to focus on to take a step back and to recognize perhaps an opportunity that we have ahead of us. And it's, I think, significant. And it's maybe understated a little bit, that it's actually COP29 is the first COP that has a day dedicated to technology and climate change. It's not today, it's on Saturday, so I hope you all stick around till Saturday. But I think that's significant. Second point that I wanted to make is that it's the third COP that is happening in the Global South. And with the fourth COP coming up, of course, in Brazil, I think we as a global society have a tremendous opportunity to actually start thinking and acting on how to bring with a smart policies, digitization, and also connect Global South to sustainable policies and sustainable actions. I think it's at the end of the day, it's about bridging digital divide. We've been talking a lot about digital divide. It's about building, bridging or preventing AI divide, and it's also about bridging the climate action divide. And I think that's very important. And second point that I wanted to share with you, all colleagues, the first day, on Monday, I was privileged to attend an event with youth and talk about climate change with young representatives, young activists. And I think that emerging markets or Global South, this is a land of youth, and it's also the land of tech optimism and AI optimism. Why it's important? Just give you one example. Nigeria, it's a country with over 220 million people, with 70% of its population being Gen Z. Very tech savvy, very hungry to apply digital technology to drive climate change. And I think that's very important, that we see this huge tech enthusiasm in this part of the world that we call Global South or emerging markets. And I think this really, really matters for policies. And I'm moving to the second, part of your conversation, because without adoption and without also population being, eager to adopt AI and digital technology, we can't achieve that much. And I think that's here in the Global South, we have a huge opportunity. So that's my opening question, and I'll hand it over to you, Mary.
Thank you so much. I want to reiterate my thanks as well. When I think about this year, it's been a year of unprecedented change. Whether you think about it from the geopolitical, what we've all experienced, if you've not personally, but someone in your family, someone in your community have experienced some of the worst effects of weather. And so when I think about climate change, we know this is the decade that we've got to take action. And for those of you who are not familiar with Cisco, we're a global technology company that I always describe it as, we securely connect everything to make anything possible, but it needs to be done in a sustainable way, in an inclusive way. And you mentioned a little bit about divides. I think in the past we might have thought so much about that digital divide, and we've made strides. We've certainly not closed it. But as you mentioned, there's more divides that are possible coming to the forefront. Data divide, right? Access to the power of what AI or generative AI could do for our lives, our community, our workplace. But there's also potentially an energy divide as well. And so how do we think about that? And I think that is where I turn to where we all live, work, and create, those communities where we all represent critical actors, whether it is private sector, public sector, community leaders, the civil society. How do we come together? And one way that allows us to have a shared conversation sometimes is really enabled by policy. Policy that maybe provides us with a shared language or common terms or a shared framework. I think it can provide incentives to encourage change, to encourage early adoption. I think that it can create the ability to create transparency in terms of how we might report or what it is that we want to identify a current state and progress. I think it also plays a huge role as we identify some great innovations, some unique success stories, and how do we actually enable that scale? How do we signal to the marketplace that we can close those divides, that we can create that climate future, we can grow our businesses at the same time? And so I see policy thoughtfully done with a lot of engagement across both public and private sector can be a huge enabler.
Thank you very much. Thank you both, Olga and Mary, for an initial statement that very much come from a perspective of tech companies and the experience that you have at those conferences. It doesn't happen often that I have an undersecretary from the United Nations next to me, and it's really a big privilege to have the Secretary General here of the Economic Commission for Africa. Africa is all over when we talk about digital divide and the question how digitalization can play a role in the development of Africa. Would you share with us some initial thoughts about this question, what role digital could play and how we can improve this potentially?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Let me just say, maybe to give you a background, I was initially the co-facilitator of the Global Digital Compact when we started. And I think I met all your companies and also Europe, Asia, and North America, met most of the people. And now at the ECA, we are now implementing really because the solution to our development, the solution for everything we are talking about is actually digital technology. And to do that, we had a meeting, we coordinate the meetings of finance ministers, which we convene every year. It is statutory. And this time we had ministers also in charge of environment, the ministers in charge of trade and industry, and also of those of technology. Now, one of the things they assigned to us is saying that we know we cannot develop without technology. And that the uptake in African continent, they are only at 8 now to 40% of those that are accessing internet. And we are trying to figure out solution. They gave us an assignment to find a solution. And one that we are working with different entities is how to find, first of all, to put the infrastructure in place. The broadband, the satellite, so that we can scale it up. There was one hurdle that was a big problem, was the taxation. Because in most of the countries, the study that we are carrying out is that they tax the handset, they tax the airtime, and they have sector-specific taxes. So that was an impediment. So the study we are doing now for 42 countries out of 44, that is almost completed, is going to show what needs to be done to reduce the taxes, and that will contribute significantly to jobs, to GDP, and it is the best way to go. But we want to make sure that it is approved by the heads of state of the African Union. That's one. Secondly, there were so many innovations driven by AI. We are surprised that each country does not talk to the other. They don't know what the other one is doing, what is happening in another country, and they are in all sectors. So we conducted a study which showed us that we have actually 307 technology innovations that are taking place on the continent in 38 sectors, including climate, agriculture, health, and so many others. And we saw that Eastern Africa was leading. We saw followed by Southern Africa and the rest. But also South Africa itself was a country that was #1, followed by so many other countries. So there are many technologies that are happening. And what we are trying to do is now we are creating a platform so that we can share with all the countries, so they can now learn from each other. Now, also what we see is that, let me just give you an example. One of the issues that we are facing is agriculture in terms of drought that's happening for a long time, and the issue of irrigation have come up many times. And we saw that a country like Eritrea is having more than 800 dams. It's already doing it. It is using solar to pump the water from the dams to do irrigation and all that. But also, we have also introduced in Botswana using AI to actually for irrigation itself. It's an experiment that we did that was very successful and is becoming a very, very good example in terms of scaling up. But in as much as it is very useful, because the way we do it at ECA is we have several departments. We have the climate, we have the Africa Center for Statistics. And we use those ones to predict the kind of climate, the weather. So that gives the early warning system for the farmers and for others who are using it. And it's now working. That's how we advise all the other countries. So it is very, very helpful in terms of the prediction. But also now we are having the critical energy transition. And with that, the critical minerals, you cannot do it without using technology, digital technology. It becomes very, very important that this time you can't do it without everything. And that's what we are promoting. And with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where we need to build infrastructure, industries, and the rest, and especially the regional value chains, you cannot do it without technology, without digital technology. So it's very critical in all aspects, in as much as it has its own downside, especially because AI requires a lot of energy, as you know, when you are pumping all these things, and also the storage also has its disadvantage. But if you put it really on a balance, there's no comparison. The impact of technology for us on the African continent is quite big. And especially because climate is costing 5% of GDP, is costing 5% of GDP to our continent. And that's why we are trying to see how we can mitigate it, but also technology has a role to play. Maybe I can stop here for now. Thank you.
Really interesting how you laid out the field. I mean, it's really, we know, a key question for Africa, for the development. And we will speak on this COP not only on Saturday, but particularly on Saturday, a lot about this. Before I look from this COP also to COP 30, and we have Henrique Donatello here, the Director of Ministry Management and Mobilization in the Public Services in Brazil. I would like to ask Ambassador Alessadandro Fracassetti, Ambassador, what's your learning curve as UNDP with digital technologies? I mean, UNDP is like the advisor to governments, both in Africa but in many other regions of the world. I think with 150 like local offices, you are heading the Egyptian one. What is your experience with the use of digital technologies, particularly for development in the region where you are?
Thank you very much. We are not ambassadors in UNDP. We are humble representatives, but thank you anyway. Thanks for the question. And I mean, really, it follows up a lot about what our USG was talking about. We have our roots on the ground. We work with governments. We also try to look at as many SDGs as possible, right, to be able to integrate our interventions. And then, of course, we try to find solutions, and that's what we are in. We are in the implementation business a lot. Before that, let me say, when UNDP tried to put together the first digital strategy was 2019, and it was an attempt really to reimagine how UNDP served its partners and manage these systems. And that foresight actually proved invaluable when the COVID pandemic came through. And that really, as we know, accelerated dramatically global digital transformation. And over the past few years, UNDP has now supported over 60 countries in the comprehensive national level digital transformation efforts. We've helped specifically over 20 countries, including Mauritania, Malawi, Palestine, implemented digital public infrastructure and digital public goods. And our work in this country addressed global challenges. So it could be anything from information pollution, social protection, access to justice, climate resilience. In the policy area, of course, and I think you referred to this earlier, very important aspect of it is really the research and using things such as AI into sustainable, into integrating that into sustainable technologies. And there's a lot we can do in modeling, in mapping, in preventing, in giving instruments to governments to look and to do in their planning. Just a word maybe about what we're doing in Egypt, but as an example, since I happen to work there, and there already for many years we work with the government on various phases of a country's digital transformation journey. And you know, anything from driving ICT innovation, offering e-services, developing human capital, supporting the creation of an inclusive society, and so on. We've been working really on modernizing and upgrading up to 2,800 Egypt post offices, and an enhanced capacity of more than 36,000 employees through training, financial inclusion governance, digital transformation, anti-money laundering. I say that because often post offices are the place that people go to do a lot of monetary, non-monetary transaction that banks cannot do. We have over half of the population do not have bank accounts. So these are really the kind of intervention that we work very much, you know, in the field. We're working on an applied innovation center, really to work on on AI solution for national challenges, and to position this center, this center of excellence within the UNDP, within the ministry, to service the entire government. Finally, on UNDP, this year, together with the G7 presidency of Italy, there has been really an agreement with UNDP to really create an AI hub for sustainable development, and that is really intended to service Africa. So that is really looking at the private sector, looking at small businesses and startups, and to work through them to really build up the capacity of AIs in all these areas. I know colleagues here have a lot of experience on working with also these startups, so we'll talk more on that later.
Thank you very much. So this is really interesting, Henrique. The new Brazilian administration has the Ministry for Management and Innovation in Public Service. That's a fascinating title. And now you have the incredible opportunity to host COP30 next year. What are the priorities of the government with respect to innovation in public services and the agenda for COP30?
Thanks, Bernhard. It's a pleasure to talk after Mary, after the Undersecretary, and after Representative Alessadandro here, because they've already said so much. And I think it provides a really good roadmap of the mission of the Ministry of Management and Innovation. You're right, public sector is necessary. Governments are paramount to create these shared purpose, to establish a level information playing field so we can all pursue, we can all row in the same direction. It's hard enough. We're on the same boat. If we row in different directions, at least if we have the information, we have government policy guiding the actions of private sector, of society, not determining, just guiding, seeing the world, imagine the world as it should be. So that's imperative. And I agree completely. And that was recognized in the last COP. We cannot reach our climate targets without taking into account the importance of technology and implement. We're only going to get there if we implement with state-of-the-art technology. And as Alessandro just said, the main instruments to do this is through digital public infrastructures and digital public goods. After all, we're all facing pretty much, even though each country's situation is different, each sector's situation is different, challenge is different, we do share many common challenges. And these sorts of challenges can only be addressed through cooperation and shared technologies. And this is where digital public goods come into place. So the Ministry of Management and Innovation Public Services, it was set up by President Lula because he acknowledged that we need a better state which is enabled to tackle these challenges. And these are not sectoral challenges. We don't have just challenges for the Ministry of Infrastructure, for the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Energy. These are common. And these capacities need to be built at federal and subnational levels too. And that's what the Ministry's mission is, to enable different parts of government to tackle these challenges. And in this sense, we have a new digital transformation strategy, a new digital transformation policy, which puts at the center the digital public infrastructure. That's how all our systems must be designed as of now, so we can allow for interoperability, So whenever I'm raising some climate information, that can easily be fed into our disaster relief systems, into our energy policy planning programs, and so on. So this is critical because digital public infrastructures, they have this power of not just sharing information, but actually putting into first or even second gear real action, taking into account information that's existent elsewhere. I'll give you an example. We have just announced a new nationally determined contribution. As you know, most of Brazil's emissions come from deforestation and land use. And now we're managing our rural environmental registry as a digital public infrastructure. What consequence has that brought on into finance? Financial processes. Every single rural loan takes into account the environmental information of every single property in the country. That's not just a huge step. That's a revolution, which provides a very good use case on how we can revolutionize our economic processes and adapt them to the challenges that we all face today.
And you leapfrog many European other countries, I can say, in this regard. And Olga, you know this well. So as a Chief Sustainability Officer at Cisco, Mary, you do work with governments. You have many clients. I mean, I know because we implement some of your systems. So give me one example of how that plays a role in what you do with clients, particularly from your company perspective.
Thank you so much. You know, maybe people don't realize that Cisco's been around almost 40 years. I was born before the internet, so I do remember the before days. And one of the things that we do is really partner with governments often to say, what are you envisioning that possibility to be? What is that digital agenda and how do we enable it? One of the areas that we have been investing in for over 25 years is talent. So one of the critical things when you think about technology, it's such a leveler, but it also automates. And that can shift and change tasks and roles. And so with our Networking Academy is one example where we have educated millions of students in partnership with many governments. And this is now as we enter the AI generation, what does that look like? So building together collectives around AI, ICT, talent coalitions to really look at the most in-demand ITC jobs. How do we think AI is going to transform it and how do we upskill? That's one example. One of the others that I think is the ability to connect with that digital agenda. I think one of the key things that we're spending a lot of time on right now is imagining the future of work. So yes, how AI is going to shift and change those workflows, but also what does those buildings, those smart buildings, those workplaces look like? How can we create centers that are a magnet for talent, but done in a way that is really decreasing energy use at the same time, delivering some very significant innovations?
This is super interesting. And coming back to Henrique's point, we see in many regards a troika. And there's a lot of talk about troika, the three COPs, UAE, now Azerbaijan, and next COP30. And I think with the digital thing, we have also the same troika. I mean, UAE started strong on AI. This COP made a clear statement with their presidency, with the Tech Day on Saturday. And a little bit forecast, there will be something coming up. Numbers, we are number crunchers at Deloitte, focusing on the use of AI technology, what that means for the energy demand. And I invite all of you to look at this on Saturday. But it's also then in Belém, and it's really about what you do, I mean, and how you really use this matrix of your ministry, which is, I think, for me, in many best practice for, as I said, for European and Northern countries to look at the way to improve the quality of government. Before I come back to Olga, Mr. Undersecretary, Africa has this chance to leapfrog, like Brazil does. You used some examples how we use technology already in some African countries. If you would have a wish from the kind of developed world to look at this as an opportunity, what would be your wish in your capacity also now as Secretary General from the Commission, Economic Commission for Africa?
Yeah, I think my wish is for really, there's no other choice except investment. Number one, by 2050, almost 1 in 3 among the youth will be African. And Africa has all the natural resources, all the minerals. You can think about it more than 50%, they are all in Africa. All the critical minerals that are going to be needed for anything that the West, that the developed world wants, they are all in Africa. But what has been done is that there has been exportation of raw materials. But now we want to do it properly, using the value chain so that you can have industries on the African continent and be able to really, when we talk about the critical minerals, they should be exploited in a better way. It should be fair, it should be transparent, and that investment would be able to help. And then at the same time, the more African countries are digitized, the better. Let me just give you one example. I was a minister of finance. Before that, I was the governor of the central bank. And I know in Rwanda, in the country called Rwanda, and when we started in 2000, we had to actually work with the ECA. They gave us a Ghanaian who came actually to Rwanda to work on a strategy, a long-term vision for 20 years. And then after that strategy, we had to implement exactly the infrastructure. We couldn't qualify for the IMF loan. So what we did was to work with Korea Telecom. So they came, we worked with them in terms of joint venture. We now had the whole broadband. We had to dig the whole country to put in the fiber. And now, after that, then we started now using that. The whole banking system was changed, the core banking system. From T24, FlexCube, Delta, everything else, we modernized the whole entire banking system. We had the e-government that was speaking to each other with all the agencies. We had to digitize the entire land of the country. All the land in the country is now digitized. If you know your IP number, everybody can tell you this is the land. The whole system now is integrated, whether it is the land or the revenue authority or the banking or everything else, they are all now interconnected. We also have the platform to Gateway to provide all the services in Rwanda through the Gateway. They call it Irembo. And that way then it solved so many problems that we used to have as a country that was emerging out of the genocide. So now, if this can work in a small country like Rwanda, it can work now in any other country. And that's why they are moving fast to the AI among the centers that we are working with, including different ones, Congo, Brazzaville, Kigali, Ghana, Accra, and everywhere else. You find that they have their own specialties, and they work. You can see them. It means it can work anywhere. And this is a good opportunity for investment to come to African continent.
I love this panel because it's so positive. It gives us really momentum to showcase how we can learn. We in the developed world can learn and really how to invest. And it's all about investment. Alessandro, I'm really proud that you mentioned the digital strategy in 2019 because I was really supporting a lot on this. It was one of my biggest projects in the UN ever. And parts of my team, Laura is there. She was in New York developing this strategy with us. So it's really great that you mentioned it. And I think that had a huge impact on your work. Do you see those projects like the former minister from Rwanda described in many areas? And UNDP is the player who can leverage one to others.
We certainly see demand for this. We certainly see governments asking us to support them in this process. Don't forget that the pace of digital transformation now with AI is just going fast. And often, governments that not always are able to have maybe visionary people that are able to bring in the partners around the table to provide the type of advice that they need to act fast. So yes, they do come to UNDP, of course. The trust is obviously one important element. But our role is often to connect them to people like yourself, to other countries that might have very important experience. And then, to try to really bring in the resources if they're missing. But the most important thing, often what we do is you need to really implement your national plans, right? One of the things UNDP is very known to do recently is to work with government to do integrated national framework. And what that is I would call it the SDGization of budgets, since you were a Minister of Finance. So that there are the two sides of governments, one the financial and the other one of the development planning, get on together, and so funding goes towards the planning that are there. So, what we see, and I think, let me say, one of the things that has happened just this September that can give us a boost a lot, and I believe you wanted to talk about that, is really the Global Digital Impact Compact, because that is a framework really for global governance and digital technology and artificial intelligence, which commits countries to develop policies which aim to expand digital economy inclusion for all. Very important to have those policies, very important to have the political will, and then, of course, as we know, implementation is the key.
Olga, I will start my final round on this panel with really asking each of you what you wish for to come out of this COP. What signal should go out? Undersecretary already said that we need the investment thing. We need to solve the climate finance problem here in Azerbaijan, and I think the presidency is really focused on this, and I know that many actors, private and public, are really in the first week particularly working hard on this. Olga, what would be your wish? And then I will come around the whole panel and finally come to you, Henrique, what your wish is with regard also what we can expect in Belém.
Thank you so much, Bernhard. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. It's fascinating. So just kind of take a step back. Google is a what we call product-first company. So we're creating products and tools that we hope do help governments and also individual users to really digitize their workplace, their processes if they own a company, and then really drive climate change. So our mission is to equip 1 billion users annually with the right information so that they can make sustainable choices. Now, we do have, and I won't be talking a lot about it, different products that really service to the mission of driving sustainability and promoting sustainability. However, and here I'm coming to my wish, for us to be able to deploy those products and really put them at use, we need to have the right policies. And again, coming back to the, kind of the panel and the topic of our panel. So my wish for this COP is to make sure that we take, and for the next COP as well, that we're working on the right policies and the framework that would help us actually drive AI and digital adoption for the sake of climate change. And, continuing in the spirit of sharing good practices coming from the Global South, I would actually want to refer to the African Union AI strategy. That's a strategy that has been just put in place a couple of months ago that is actually about creating a shared vision for how AI should be implemented at the national level of regulation to drive digital adoption, AI adoption, and to make sure that we position Africa as a relay leader once it comes to digital AI and sustainability. And we as a company want to see more of this. We've been working closely with the African Union, and we will continue working closely with all the member states to equip public officials with the right knowledge and to bring our tools and products at use, but we can't do it without the right policies.
Great. So the first wish was the Undersecretary fixing the climate finance issue. That's a really big wish. The second wish is we need strong policies in place that help us to accelerate the digital transformation. Mary, what's your wish?
First, +1. Second, I think it's momentum. How do we create and sustain momentum? And that's going to require the policies, the incentives, the collective actions, the partnership. And also, I think sometimes thinking of a portfolio, not everything that we are going to implement has been proven. So how do we do enough with patient capital to drive the information, to harness the information, and then scale what we know is working under the right conditions?
Really like it very much. Momentum, finance, strong policies, and Alessandro spoke about leverage, right? It's about leveraging one existing best practice into others. So finally now, this is COP29. We are looking ahead. This is a troika. They decided together, the UAE, Azerbaijan, and Brazil, at the first time in history of COPs, and I'm a COP veteran, to really work closely together. What will that lead us to Belém?
Well, considering that Brazil's long-standing tradition of strengthening multilateral governance, we believe we must reach the objectives of this COP. And this is focused on finance. So we must guarantee the financial volumes and mechanisms. This is paramount. We've been negotiating for a very long time, so we can reach the end of this COP with this into place. And during the previous 28 COPs, governments all around the world have been creating this vision, which has been made concrete in the pledges, 1.5 degrees, in the NDCs that were presented in Paris, in the NDCs that will be updated by next year. And that's a very clear signal to the whole of society on where we should move. And as I said, the financial sector does have a critical role in this process because they are very powerful lever in the way they set the rules, in the way they enable economic processes all around in every single sector of the economy. So this vision, this clear set of restrictions, but also possibilities, they need to be incorporated into the practice of the financial sector. And here I'm talking about BIS, I'm talking about multilateral development banks, I'm talking about the big players, the big private players, because then this trickles down. And that's the output that we really want from this COP.
Thank you very much, and that is of course something that we work on, and I'm very confident to get a strong signal out of Baku that leads us to Belém. The road to Belém is open. Final words from the Undersecretary on the financing. What is your wish finally?
Thank you very much. Before I come to that, let me just say that we have, the Economic Commission for Africa has an MOU with Google. And we are trying to implement the vision, the IT vision for the African Union, which we actually drafted as ECA. And that's why we invited your Vice President Manyika in March of this year in Victoria Falls, so that we can work together. So we want to have a continental-wide implementation of that. And also we can get more partners to that, which is very, very important. But when you talk about the resources that are needed, the 2.8 trillion for NDC that is coming and all that for Africa, when you talk about the blue bond, the green bonds, the sustainability-linked bonds, here we should include technology, we should include digital as part of that implementation. Sometimes we talk about other things, but you cannot do other things without incorporating digital technology. And that's why when we are talking about those resources, they should include that kind of component, because that's what is going to help African countries to continue to grow. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you very much. So I think one big learning, and that goes to this last word, is that without digital, we will not solve this. Without finance, we will not solve it, but without digital solutions, we will not fix the climate problem. I have to really thank you for a great panel, which was positive, which will create momentum. Olga, Marie, hosting this, thank you very much. Great to have you. Thank you for